Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the dimly lit laundry room, Lawson sat among the quiet cacophony of swirling agitators and the thumping cylinders of dryers. The droning machinery always lulled him into a semi-conscious state, his thoughts wandering as he sat perched on top of a washer, legs dangling, eyes glazed over. Suddenly, a loud buzz broke his reverie. The dryer's cycle had ended. Lawson rose and opened the dryer door, his fingers reaching in to extract his laundry. What he felt, however, shocked him. Smooth, silky material, completely alien to the expected roughness of his t-shirts and denim. He muttered, confusion etched across his face. He glanced around the laundry room, wondering if someone was playing a prank on him. But he was alone, surrounded only by the mechanical whir of the machines. Lawson's mind raced. These clothes clearly belonged to someone else, probably one of his neighbors. But how had they ended up in his dryer? He vaguely remembered seeing a woman leave the laundry room as he entered, but he hadn't paid much attention at the time. He gathered the unfamiliar clothes in his arms, unsure of what to do. Should he leave them in the laundry room? Try to find their owner? As he stood there, deliberating, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a different suggestion. What if he tried them on? Lawson shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. But it persisted, growing louder with each passing moment. He'd never considered wearing women's clothing before, but something about these garments called to him. The navy blue skirt looked so sleek and professional, and the white blouse seemed impossibly soft. Before he could talk himself out of it, Lawson found himself heading back to his apartment, the mysterious clothes clutched tightly to his chest. His heart raced as he closed the door behind him, feeling like he was about to embark on some clandestine mission. In the privacy of his bedroom, Lawson laid out the clothes on his bed. The navy blue pencil skirt seemed to shimmer under the light, its fabric smooth and inviting. The white silk blouse looked crisp and elegant, with delicate buttons running down the front. With trembling hands, Lawson reached for the skirt. He stepped into it, pulling it up over his hips. The fabric hugged his body in a way he'd never experienced before. It felt right. He zipped up the side, marveling at how it accentuated his waist. Next came the blouse. As he slipped his arms through the sleeves, the silk caressed his skin. He fumbled with the buttons, unused to their small size and placement on the opposite side from what he was accustomed to. Finally, he managed to fasten them all. Lawson turned to face the full-length mirror on his closet door. His breath caught in his throat. The person staring back at him was different. The navy blue skirt hugged his hips and fell just above his knees, creating a silhouette he'd never seen on himself before. The white blouse draped elegantly over his chest, its softness a stark contrast to the stiff cotton shirts he usually wore. But it was more than just the clothes. There was something in his posture, in the way he held himself, that had changed. He stood taller, his shoulders back, chin lifted. For the first time in his life, Lawson felt beautiful. A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. Panic coursed through him as he realized he was still wearing the unfamiliar clothes. He couldn't answer the door like this. "Just a minute!" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. He rushed to change back into his own clothes, his fingers fumbling with the buttons of the blouse. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Lawson? It's Sarah from next door. I think there's been a mix-up with our laundry. Lawson froze. Sarah. Of course. These must be her clothes. He'd seen her around the complex before, a friendly face with a warm smile. But how could he face her now, knowing he'd tried on her clothes? Taking a deep breath, Lawson made a decision. He couldn't hide forever. With shaking hands, he opened the door. Sarah stood in the hallway, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a pair of Lawson's jeans and a t-shirt that hung loosely on her smaller frame. Her eyes widened as she took in Lawson's appearance, the navy blue skirt still clinging to his hips, the white blouse half unbuttoned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lawson's heart pounded in his chest, waiting for the shock, the disgust, the anger he was sure would come. But Sarah's face softened into a smile. "Oh, honey," she said gently. "It looks like you've made quite a discovery." Lawson felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He hadn't realized how terrified he'd been of rejection until this moment. I don't know what came over me," he stammered. I wanted to see." Sarah reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's okay. Really, why don't you let me in and we can talk about this?" Nodding mutely, Lawson stepped back, allowing Sarah to enter his apartment. He closed the door behind her, leaning against it for support. Sarah looked around the apartment, taking in the masculine decor, the leather couch, the sports memorabilia on the walls. Then her gaze returned to Lawson, standing awkwardly in her clothes. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. Lawson swallowed hard. "It feels right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt like this before. Like I'm finally seeing myself clearly." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes it takes an accident like this for us to discover parts of ourselves we've been hiding, even from ourselves." She moved to sit on the couch, patting the spot next to her. Lawson joined her, careful not to wrinkle the skirt as he sat. "Have you ever thought about this before?" Sarah asked. "About exploring your feminine side?" Lawson shook his head. "Never. I mean, I've always felt different, like I didn't quite fit in with other guys, but I never understood why." Sarah smiled encouragingly. "Well, it looks like you might have found a piece of the puzzle. What do you want to do now?" Lawson looked down at his hands, twisted nervously in his lap. I don't know. Part of me wants to explore this more, to see where it leads. But I'm scared. What if people find out? What if they judge me?" "Oh, honey," Sarah said, her voice full of compassion. "People might judge. That's just how some folks are. But you can't live your life for them. You have to be true to yourself." She reached out, gently tucking a strand of Lawson's blonde hair behind his ear. "And for what it's worth, I think you look beautiful." Lawson felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "Really?" he asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Sarah nodded emphatically. "Really, and if you want, I'd be happy to help you explore this side of yourself. We could start with some clothes, maybe some makeup, whatever you're comfortable with." Lawson's eyes widened. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "That's what friends are for, and I have a feeling we're going to be great friends." For the first time since opening the door, Lawson felt a genuine smile spread across his face. "I'd like that," he said softly. Sarah clapped her hands together. Wonderful. Now, first things first. We need to find you a name, something that feels right for this new side of you. Lawson thought for a moment.
Ellie,
he said suddenly.
I've always liked that name.
Ellie, Sarah repeated, testing it out. I love it. It suits you. From that moment on, Ellie's journey of self-discovery began in earnest. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became not just a friend, but a mentor and confidant. She helped Ellie build a wardrobe, teaching her about different styles and how to put outfits together. They started small, with Ellie wearing feminine undergarments beneath her usual male attire. It was a secret that made her feel powerful and true to herself, even if no one else could see it. Gradually, Ellie began to incorporate more visible feminine elements into her wardrobe. A flowy blouse here, a pair of women's jeans there. She marveled at how something as simple as clothing could make her feel so much more like herself. Sarah taught Ellie the basics of makeup, starting with a simple routine of foundation, mascara, and lip gloss. The first time Ellie saw herself fully made up, she couldn't stop staring at her reflection. It was like seeing herself clearly for the first time. As Ellie grew more confident in her feminine presentation, she began to consider the possibility of transitioning fully. It was a daunting prospect, filled with unknowns and potential challenges. But with Sarah's unwavering support, Ellie felt strong enough to face whatever came her way. She started by coming out to a few close friends, choosing those she felt would be most accepting. To her relief and joy, most of them responded with love and support. There were a few who struggled to understand, but Ellie found that their confusion came from a place of caring rather than judgment. The conversation with her parents was more difficult. Ellie's hands shook as she dialed their number, her heart pounding in her chest. Sarah sat beside her, offering silent support as Ellie explained her journey of self-discovery. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ellie held her breath, fearing the worst. But then her mother's voice came through, filled with emotion. "Oh, sweetheart, we love you no matter what. We just want you to be happy." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she listened to her parents' words of acceptance and love. It wasn't perfect. They had questions, concerns, things they didn't understand. But their love for their child was unconditional, and that was what mattered most. With the support of her friends and family, Ellie began the process of medical transition. She started hormone therapy, marveling at the subtle changes in her body and emotions. Her skin softened, her facial features became more delicate, and she felt a sense of peace she'd never experienced before. Throughout it all, Sarah remained by her side. She accompanied Ellie to doctor's appointments, helped her navigate the complexities of legally changing her name and gender marker, and provided a shoulder to cry on during the challenging moments. As months passed, Ellie's confidence grew. She began to present as female full-time, reveling in the joy of finally living authentically. The navy blue pencil skirt and white silk blouse that had started it all became cherished items in her wardrobe, reminders of the journey she'd undertaken. One sunny afternoon, almost a year after that fateful laundry mix-up, Ellie and Sarah sat in a cafe, sipping lattes and people-watching. Ellie wore a flowing sundress, her blonde hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked radiant, happiness shining from within. "I can't believe how much has changed," Ellie mused, stirring her coffee absently. "A year ago, I was so lost. I didn't even know who I was." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing Ellie's hand. "And look at you now. You're flourishing, honey. It's beautiful to see." Ellie smiled, a hint of tears in her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. You've been such an amazing friend through all of this. Oh, stop! Sarah laughed, waving her hand dismissively. You did all the hard work. I just provided some clothes and moral support. It was so much more than that, Ellie insisted. You saw me, the real me, even before I could see it myself. Sarah's expression softened. Well, I'm just glad I could be there for you, and I'm even gladder that we ended up being neighbors. Who knew a laundry mix-up could lead to all this? Ellie laughed, the sound light and carefree. It's funny how life works out sometimes, isn't it? One little accident, and suddenly everything changes. As they continued chatting, Ellie found herself reflecting on the journey she'd undertaken. It hadn't always been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of loneliness. But sitting here now, feeling truly comfortable in her own skin for the first time in her life, she knew it had all been worth it. The accidental swap of clothes had been more than just a mix-up. It had been a catalyst, setting in motion a series of events that led Ellie to discover her true self. She thought about the person she'd been a year ago, lost, confused, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for her. And she compared that to who she was now, confident, happy, living authentically. As the afternoon wore on, Ellie and Sarah finished their coffees and decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The sun was warm on their skin, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees lining the path. You know, Ellie said as they strolled, I've been thinking about giving back somehow. Maybe volunteering or something. I want to help other people who might be going through what I did. Sarah's face lit up. That's a wonderful idea. You'd be amazing at that. Your experience could really help others who are just starting their journeys. Ellie nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Maybe I could start a support group or something, a place where people can come and feel safe, accepted. I think that's perfect, Sarah agreed. And you know I'll be there to help in any way I can. As they walked, Ellie found herself marveling at how far she'd come. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined walking in a public park, presenting as her true self. Now it felt as natural as breathing. They passed a playground, filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Ellie watched them for a moment, a wistful smile on her face. What are you thinking about? Sarah asked, noticing her friend's expression. Ellie sighed softly. Just the future, I guess. I never really let myself think about it before. It always felt so uncertain. But now... Sarah nudged her gently. And now? Now I can see possibilities, Ellie said, her voice filled with wonder. A career I love, maybe a family someday. Things I never thought were in the cards for me before. Sarah beamed at her friend. The world is your oyster, honey. You can do anything you set your mind to. As they continued their walk, Ellie felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey she'd undertaken hadn't always been easy, but it had led her to this moment, walking in the sunshine, comfortable in her own skin, with a dear friend by her side and a future full of possibilities ahead of her. She thought back to that day in the laundry room, when she'd first held that navy blue pencil skirt and white silk blouse in her hands. It had been a moment of confusion, of fear, of excitement, but more than anything, it had been a moment of revelation, the first step on a path to discovering her true self. Now, as Ellie walked through the park, her sundress swaying gently in the breeze, she felt grateful for that mix-up. It had been the push she needed to explore a side of herself she'd kept hidden for so long. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Ellie and Sarah made their way back to their apartment complex. They chatted and laughed, making plans for dinner and a movie night. Stepping into her apartment, Ellie paused for a moment, taking in the space around her. It had changed so much over the past year, just as she had. Gone were the sports posters and leather furniture. In their place were soft, feminine touches, floral curtains, plush throw pillows, and framed photos of Ellie with her friends and family. Her eyes fell on a framed photo on her dresser, a selfie she and Sarah had taken on the day of the laundry mix-up. In it, Ellie was wearing the navy blue pencil skirt and white silk blouse, a nervous but excited smile on her face. Sarah stood beside her, arm around Ellie's shoulders, beaming with pride. Ellie picked up the photo, running her finger gently over the glass. It was a reminder of how far she'd come, of the journey she'd undertaken. But more than that, it was a promise to always be true to herself, to live authentically, and to help others do the same. As she set the photo back down, Ellie caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. She saw a woman who was confident, happy, and at peace with herself. A woman who had faced her fears and emerged stronger for it. A woman who was, finally and truly, herself. With a contented sigh, Ellie turned away from the mirror and began preparing for her evening with Sarah. As she chose an outfit, a comfortable pair of leggings and a soft, oversized sweater, she felt a surge of gratitude for the twist of fate that had led her here. The laundry mix-up that had seemed like such a disaster at the time had turned out to be the greatest gift she'd ever received. It had given her the courage to explore, to question, and ultimately to become the person she was always meant to be. As Ellie settled in for a cozy night with her best friend, she knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, she was ready to face them. She was Ellie now, strong, authentic, and surrounded by love. And that, she realized, was the greatest transformation of all.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!